Hello class, and welcome to your week 4 or module 4 lecture. This module's lecture is going to be on the beliefs, characteristics, and habits of elite entrepreneurs. And the book that we're going to be reviewing and pulling a lot of information for you from is called The Entrepreneur Mind. And you'll see that we've actually got some great insights for you out of this book. Now, this book is written in a very different way than a traditional book. And the reason I say that is because what Mr. Johnson has done is he's identified for you 100 of what he thinks are essential beliefs, characteristics, and habits of elite entrepreneurs. And in that 100 listing, he's broken them down into a variety of areas. And we'll break into each of those areas. The book itself is written in a snapshot type of format, and by that I mean that what he does is he provides epiphanies, small stories, small suggestions, areas of concentration based upon what I would call lessons learned or best practices from elite entrepreneurs and his personal experience. So his documentation as he's going through this is sharing small stories and then the relevance of that back to you as an entrepreneur. Whether you're an experienced entrepreneur or whether you're a growing entrepreneur, a lot of these characteristics are going to be areas that you haven't explored or heard of before. So we're gonna go ahead and break into that particular, I'll call it discovery for you. And he breaks things down into what we refer to as those 100 short stories based on what I'm going to break into 7 key entrepreneurial areas. The first area is going to be strategy. The second area is going to be on education. The third area is going to be on people. The fourth is going to be on finance. The fifth is marketing and sales. The sixth is on leadership. And then finally, the seventh is going to be on motivation. Each of these areas that we're going to explore, I'm going to basically unveil for you 2 or 3 pages of information associated with each one of those areas. So let's go ahead and take a peek at from a I'll call it an introduction standpoint. His premise is that as an entrepreneur, you think differently, that you must think differently than traditional people. And that the philosophy that you're born with this talent is not correct. Entrepreneurs can learn entrepreneurial skills, actions, behaviors. They can be taught, and they can, basically pass that information on to other people. So what we've created is a valid synopsis for you. We want you to be able to grow and expand your own set of beliefs, characteristics, and habits. So let's jump into that first area, which is strategy. And that what he basically lays out for you is that entrepreneurs must ask 3 vital questions. Where are you now? What's your current position? Where do you want to be? And how do you want to get there? How do we get there? And he basically says that if you don't have a strategy that lays this out, then you're not prepared to move forward as an entrepreneur. And that the key points for him, and you'll see that off to the, I'll call it right below my image, you're going to see these are the key areas, number 1 through 35, that he's laid out for you from a strategic standpoint. We're going to cover the top 3 of what I think are very, very valid for you, not only for this course, but for the information and the exploration you're on. The first one's going to be called Thinking Big. The second one is for you to be able to ask for help. And then the third is what he finds necessary is to have an exit strategy. So let's go into that first one, thinking big. And he talks about the reasons that a entrepreneurial endeavor, or whatever you want to call it, the process, fail is in 2 ways. And one is not surviving the start or the startup, and the other one is not being able to reach its full potential. So his premise is that the goal should be to challenge and help solid businesses ascend to the next level. How do you grow things? How do they get, to the next step? Thinking big simply doesn't mean pursuing ideas and maximizing, the scope of your potential. He says you must outgrow your current environment and to go to that next step. And one of the ways that he really recommends is that you talk to as many people as possible. Tell them what you're doing and embrace the comments that they give you. Have them tell you what's wrong with your idea. Because if they can give you that information, it allows you to make course corrections, and he's always talking about that course correction. We're going to get into other areas that we're going to talk about being able to make pivots. We're going to talk about other areas where you need to basically abandon a certain strategy and move to another one. Let's go ahead and go to the next area, which is called asking for help. So one of the quickest ways to lead a life of mediocrity, according to him, or utter failure, is to think that you are more important than everybody else, and that you can accomplish all of these tasks, whatever it is you're doing, by yourself. That is not true. What is required is that you do ask other people for help. And he says that most of the people that he runs across or in the past has talked to, there's a couple reasons that they don't ask for help. One is that they think that the people that they're asking for are too busy, that they've either got too much going on, and that, from his perspective, he thinks that this is due to your ability to have an oversized ego and the tendency to be introverted. And he does point to statistics that talk about a tremendous number of entrepreneurs being more introverted than extroverted, and that introverted nature prevents you from actually going up and asking for help. And he wants you to know that by asking for help, it's not a sign of weakness. But one of the things is that it's not natural for us to go to other people and say, hey, I need help. Is there any way you can help me? Now, the third area in this strategy section is going to be called have an exit strategy. And he talks about, at a certain point, you need to understand that a business venture, an entrepreneurial, I'll call it endeavor, is not going in the correct direction. And he talks about how many business owners had a retirement, I'll call it, or an exit strategy set up. And, depending on where you're looking for data, you're going to find that, a tremendous number of entrepreneurial endeavors fail. If you talk to entrepreneurs, they'll tell you they constantly are failing over and over and over again until they do find one, I'll call it, success. So their philosophy is that you need to understand that failure is an option and that it's going to happen. He says young entrepreneurs don't understand that they need to have an exit in mind. What is your exit plan? If we don't make this much in revenue, if we don't explore this much, where are we going? When are we going to be able to pull the plug on that and then move on to the next one? And he says that is based upon good decision making for your business. So you need to be able to understand how to make really good and great decisions, that those skills will be something very important for you. Now, the second piece that we're going to talk about is called education, and he breaks education down into, I'm going to pull at it into two different formats. One is going to be traditional education. The other is going to be lessons learned or non-traditional education that you pick up from other sources. And he talks about needing to do specific things: reading books, studying successful people, attending conferences, networking events, reading industry magazines. All of these are going to be non-traditional education formats. The traditional format is going to be to go get an MBA from Harvard or Wharton or one of the top premier, I'll call it, educational institutions, colleges. And he's going to break us down into two different areas. So let's go ahead and talk about school is not necessarily education. So schools, depending on what kind of school you go to, he talks about formal education and that it can be a hindrance. And that is because you have an ability to educate yourself, and that education you pick up for yourself is the bottom line. I mean, it really increases the bottom line for you. You're never going to stop learning. He wants you to know that your education should never, be something that you walk away from. You're always going to want to learn, but being in a traditional schooling environment may not be the best thing for you at a certain point. Now, he does talk all the way up through high school. Not a problem. An education into college and getting college experience being very, very valuable, but exploring advanced degrees, MBAs and advanced degrees, may not be as good for you. He talks about that being considered credentialing, getting yourself that MBA, getting yourself that doctorate degree. Those are credentialing type of activities, and he said that they can be very costly and they can put you into debt. His suggestion would be save the money, go out and start up a company and get that learning experience, that hands-on experience for yourself. And he refers to all of these as experiments. Every entrepreneurial activity that he moves forward with is referred to as an experiment. And he says experimentation is great because you learn a tremendous amount from it. When the experiment is over, you move on to the next experiment. So that is his philosophy for traditional versus non-traditional education. And then when he talks about trying to seek knowledge wherever you can find it, he says that many times knowledge is hidden in places that we just don't go. You don't think about a lot of these described areas as places that you would pick up knowledge, but he says as an entrepreneur, this is where a tremendous amount of it is hidden for you. Learn as much about your business as you constantly can. What is it doing? What is it evolving? Any web information you can pick up, any conferences you can go to, any industry magazines on your relevant area that your ideas are on, reading all the white papers you can get your hands on, attending conferences, and then he does talk about interviewing experts, having an opportunity to sit down and talk to an expert, and then examining any published case studies. Now, that finishes up the education piece of it. Now we're going to break into item number 3, which is talking about people. And in the people area, he really talks about the type of person you are as an entrepreneur and your ability to try to, I'll call it, move into a more managerial role where you may have gaps and you may need to beef yourself up or have assistance. He's going to talk about the characteristics of entrepreneurs as being somewhat odd and that that's okay. And that how do we get you the right mentor? So let's go ahead and move into don't manage people, manage expectations. And he talks specifically about how hard it is to look at people and because you're on a personal relationship with them, trying to manage people, he says that just doesn't work, especially in the long run. He talks about the way to really resolve this is to look at what your expectations are. Sit down with somebody else and say, this is my expectation that you will complete this activity by this date. Be specific. And once either that happens or doesn't happen, you've got something that you can point back to. It isn't that the person failed, that you weren't able to manage the person. It's that that activity, whatever that task was, either we were able to complete it or we weren't, and then we can look at what was it that prevented us from being able to do that. The conflict comes when we have people trying to defend their position. I worked as hard as I could, but I wasn't able to complete something. Well, that is a very valid type of, I'll call it expression or complaint with people. But if you can kind of remove yourself from that personal part of it and start looking at things as an expectation, manage those expectations with people. The next piece is where he's going to talk about multiple areas where he has seen, I'll call it entrepreneurial activities that tend to fall into areas that would refer to you as being odd. That as an entrepreneur, you may be considered odd and that that's okay. And statistically, he's got data that shows that 35% of, I'll call it, those suffered from dyslexia are entrepreneurs compared to 10% of people that have dyslexia from a regular population. So there's a tremendous number of entrepreneurs that have data validated that they suffer from dyslexia at a higher rate than a general population. And in this dyslexia, it is a learning disability affecting one's reading and comprehension. These type of entrepreneurs that have this tend to delegate tasks to manage their disability. They are great at delegating. They've learned that if they delegate, that works better for them. And he's got 3 specific people that he talks about, one being Steve Jobs at Apple, John Chambers at Cisco, and Richard Branson of the Virgin Group. The next thing we're going to talk about is ADD, attention deficit, so that disorder where People have a hard time concentrating. You'll find that a lot of entrepreneurs tend to be very disorganized. They tend to be all over the place all the time, sporadic. And that is because they have a hard time focusing. ADD can be one of those things that would, I'll call it, prevent you from looking what we would typically call being normal, and you would be considered odd if you had ADD. Now, we all know people that have ADD, and we all know certain characteristics in ourselves that might be considered ADD. But he points to people that are not seen as normal, like Paul Orfalea, you know, the founder of Kinko's. He was known for having ADD. Now, the other area of it is what I'm going to call Asperger's or mild autism. These are people that don't enjoy, I'll call it that camaraderie of being around other people, that necessity of communicating face-to-face with other people. These people would be the people that prefer to send an email or a messenger message to someone sitting right next to them rather than having that personal conversation. And you know, his example for that is Mark Zuckerberg. So if you have certain characteristics that you think make you odd as an entrepreneur, it's okay. There are a tremendous number of entrepreneurs out there that already exhibit some of these characteristics, and they've been very successful. Now, let's talk about getting you a mentor. Getting the right mentor is very, very not only hard, but it's essential for you to get you on your entrepreneurial journey, to keep you going focused in the right direction. And what the problem is that a lot of people will get a mentor, but that mentorship or mentee, I'll call it activity, isn't defined well enough to understand where you want to go. So you're looking for a mentor. It's got to be somebody that is already gone the direction you want to go. Somebody that has that experience, somebody that can give you that relevancy, that can tell you what it is, give you advice, you know, give you that vision of where you need to go and how to get there, what their recommendations would be. He also talks about, you know, entrepreneurs not picking up mentors because they think that it would be a pest. I would be a pest if I asked you for advice, that if I asked you to mentor me. He says, don't worry about that. You've got to get over the fear of that. You've got to get out and start asking people for their opinion. What do they know? You've got to find, I'll call it the right mentor for you, and keep possibly changing mentors when you mature out of certain ones, and then look at the opportunity to be a mentor for other people in a mentor-mentee type of environment. Okay? Now we're going to go to number 4. Number 4 is finance, and we're going to talk about 3 key points in finance. The first one is that a check in the hand means nothing. And that's something that I've embraced for a long time, which means that you don't woohoo the opportunity until you know for sure it is an opportunity that you've been able to catch. The next one is borrowing money from a bank before you need it. And then the final one is the biggest investment in the company is you. Those 3 key areas are from areas 51 through 63. Let's go to the first one. A check in the hand, or borrowing money from a bank before you need it. Okay, so he constantly says you need to make sure that you are going to borrow money from a bank or multiple banks, and if you wait until you need the money, they recognize that you are a higher risk and that it will cost you more money. If you are looking at constantly the opportunity to get money to use to leverage other activities, this is a very positive thing. And if you don't need the money but are still exploring the opportunity, you can play multiple banks against each other, get the lowest rate. But banks consider your deposits liabilities, not assets. So what they're looking for is someone that is confident, someone that is low risk, and someone that may need money that we can use. Okay, so what you want to do is you want to set yourself up in that position if possible. Now, the next piece of it is a check in the hand means nothing. And by that, it means don't count your money until it's in the bank. For me, it's always 2 times that we woohoo. One is when the PO is cut and I get an official PO. So if I got a purchase order for something, that is one of the, I'll call it the first step in where you would do a mini celebration. The next one comes when the cash or the check is in my hand and I've taken it to the bank and I've deposited it and it has cleared. Make sure that the check is good and valid and that it clears before you start to celebrate. A lot of people get checks that they go and cash and they think that this is great. The problem is there was not enough money or insufficient funds to cover it. So save the celebration, as he puts it, until you have cold cash in your hands or the funds have been verified. And he talks specifically about go down to the bank with the check and show it to them and say, will this clear? Is there enough cash on hand to cover this? And if yes, that's a good thing. If no, at least I know that. And you can do that verification also over the phone. You can pick up the phone, you can call a bank, you can let them know I have a check from someone. This is the account number. This is the amount that the check has been written for. Will it clear? And they will give you that information. They won't give you any more information than that, but they will let you know whether or not a check will clear. The third area is going to be talking about the biggest investment in your company is you. It really is you. Entrepreneurs' mistakes range from not preparing thoroughly to not answering a question during a question and answer session, and in general, how promising your business may be. Investors want to know if you have some skin in the game. So those two areas are the two that he thinks are really, really important. These are the biggest mistakes that you could basically broadcast to other people. If you do not feel comfortable investing in your own company, why should other people? You need to invest in your idea, your invention, your venture, your entrepreneurial activity, whatever it is. And you need to be able to quantify that. And by quantifying it, it may be that I've got 1,000 hours of dedicated time that I've spent towards this specific activity. And at current rate of, say, $25 an hour, that would be an investment, a personal investment of $25,000 already, not counting the cash that I've put in. Be able to quantify exactly what your commitment to your investment is. That biggest investment we're talking about in the company is you, and you need to be able to tell people exactly what your position is. How invested am I? How behind this venture am I? Okay? Now, we're going to go into the next area, number 5, which is marketing and sales. It comes out of the key areas 64 through 76. And here we're going to talk about the customer is your boss. You may think that as an entrepreneur, I don't have a boss anymore. Well, you will always have a boss because the customer dictates that, and he is the boss or she is the boss for you. And that networking, when you go into networking types of situations, is not all about you. It's about what can we bring together. And that the final area is going to be one I love, which is called don't hold grudges. So let's go ahead and take a peek at your customer is the boss. You really need to understand that unless you have a very unique type of product, idea, service, that you are always going to have a specific customer that drives, okay, that I'll call it, will give you feedback that is your boss. Now, if you've got a company like Apple, Apple came out and they had such a unique product. They created it on their own. They pushed forward into areas that other people had not explored. So they created their own customer base. So their boss was still their customer base, but it was internally driven by stakeholders and things like that. You need to remember that the idea that entrepreneurs are free of accountability is misguided and delusional. You are always going to be accountable to someone, whether that's the customer, whether that's an internal stakeholder, whether that's the investors. No matter who it is, you will be accountable. And ultimately, every business is accountable for meeting the needs of the customer. Now, the biggest way to fail, or one of the clearest and easiest indicators of a failure, is when you neglect your customer. Neglecting a customer is a fatal mistake. Entrepreneurs get fired every day because a customer decides that, you know what, I'm going to go someplace else. I don't feel comfortable with where I'm at, or this person or this service isn't meeting my expectations. They will move on. And when they do, that is in essence your customer firing you. Now, let's talk about networking, because the traditional model, the social networking event right now, is that we get together and we talk about ourselves. And this particular area, I think, is one of the epiphanies that's really, really valuable. This particular point that he makes here is one that is not a traditional mindset out there, and that is that when you go into a networking event, and he wants you to network, but he doesn't want you to talk about you. What he wants you to do is he wants you to ask 3 questions, okay? And those questions are, what is the best type of customer for your business? You're talking to someone else and you're asking them, what is the best type of customer for your business? Because I can direct customers to you. It's a very different philosophy. If I come across someone in my network, how would I know that this is a good customer for you? You're taking it away from being about me, and we're talking about the other person. And then the final piece of it is, what specifically can I do to help you grow your business? He says that is what the networking environment should be about. He says that immediately there's 2 things that happen. One is that you break a lot of the bonds and create a relationship. That the relationship immediately is based upon, what can I do to help you? And then the other one is that you will trust me. He says that ultimately those 2 characteristics will spread themselves out, and other people will want to do the same for you. So that networking is about listening to other people. It's talking about, how can I drive customers, or I'll call it activities in your direction. He says that whole premise bases itself on the philosophy that other people will see that also, and they will drive that same activity to you. What a difference is what he refers to it as. Now, the final area here is don't hold grudges. And you have to find a way as an entrepreneur to not, you got to have a really, really tough hide. You've got to be able to tame your anger. Even if, as he refers to it, you find a customer that looks at you and says they have no value for your product or service, and they tell you to your face. He says that is the hardest thing to do, but that you need to transform rejection or a negative occurrence in your business to positive energy so that you move beyond that. He says, treat those that reject you like they are the biggest and best clients you have. Learn from what they tell you. Listen to what they're telling you, and to be courteous at all times. Do not fly off the hook. Don't get angry. Don't show that. Don't hold grudges. You've got to get beyond that, and you need to look at it almost as if it's a process. Okay? The next area that we're going to go into is going to be called leadership. And in leadership, what we're going to do is we're going to talk about leadership qualities and how they can be taught and learned. And that there are countless examples available of technical entrepreneurs who learned to be leaders of their companies. And the way they did that was they pushed beyond their fear. They will make their dreams come true, and they're prepared to lose it all. They have to be prepared to lose it all. So those 3 areas. Let's go into the first one. Push beyond your fear, and this is really tough. He says that you are always in the entrepreneurial journey going to have obstacles in front of you, and if you're afraid of those obstacles, they are going to prevent you from being able to move forward. You need to attack them. Attack that obstacle. Get beyond it. Get in it. Get your hands dirty. Move through it. That's the only way for you to be a true entrepreneur. Standing on the sidelines isn't going to be valuable for you. The next piece is going to be that fear can become a very valuable tool to determine risk and possible opportunities for you. So use that fear as something positive for yourself. Being afraid of something doesn't mean that it prevents you from doing it. It could be your instinct, your gut feel, that the hair on the back of your neck standing up and saying, I'm not sure about this. Those are all very, very valuable things to listen to. Listening to them is different than using them or having them prevent you from moving forward. Okay? The next one's going to be make your dreams come true. And in here, what we talk about is that you've got to have a dream. You need to be, you're born with dreams. All of us have dreams. We have the ability and the desire to chase our dreams. As an entrepreneur, you may have more dreams than other people. You may look at yourself and say, wow, I have all these different dreams and aspirations, and other people don't seem to have those. Don't be afraid to change that dream, move from one dream to another. When you see that something is achievable, when you spot something, you say, wow, I can do this, that's where they want you to focus. They want you to go there. And then don't let other people tell you what you cannot do. Okay? If they want to tell you what you can do and help you get there and things like that, that's a perfect opportunity. But don't let other people tell you that, hey, you can't do that. That doesn't make yourself it doesn't make yourself valuable. You want to surround yourself with other people that support and encourage your dreams. Okay? The next piece is going to be prepared to lose it all. That's the final piece. And he talks about entrepreneurs, one after another, knowing that at any moment the entrepreneurial effort could be over. You know, that you need to be prepared to lose it all, but never give up. Always keep the pressure on in the activity that you're working on. Never give up on something, but be prepared to do what we refer to in certain areas as pivot to something else. So you need to be able to understand that. Each entrepreneurial experience, the failures and the wins, are learning opportunities preparing you to deal with what we refer to as challenging times. And rarely do engineers talk, rarely do entrepreneurs talk about how bad things can get. We'll talk about, yeah, that was not a really good one, but we don't usually go into details about how bad things really can be for entrepreneurs. How I was down to my last dollar before this happened. I've been eating macaroni and cheese for 2 months. You know, I've been surviving on peanut butter sandwiches. I didn't have the electricity on for a couple months before this happened. I've worked at a startup before where we were unable to make the payment for the electric bill. And they turned the electric off on us. And as soon as they did that, the phones didn't work. And as soon as the phones didn't work, that morning, within hours, we had people knocking on our door saying, I need to be paid for this. You owe us for these bills. And we had to pay out all the bills there, all because we made the simple mistake of not paying the electric bill. So you need to really look at the implications, you know, about things that can happen to you. Situations like that are going to be really, really epiphanies for you. Now, the seventh area, the final area we're going to go into is called motivation. And motivation comes from 7 different areas or different forms. And they may be subtle. Some of them may even be subconscious. You may not even think about them from a motivational standpoint. But you must be keenly aware of what motivates you to ensure maximum effort is sustainable. And these key points are going to be: being successful is not the goal. You've got other goals. Entrepreneurship is in your blood, and it's never too late to be an entrepreneur. So let's take a peek at these particular areas. Being successful is not the goal for many, many entrepreneurs. It isn't about being successful. It's the challenge. It's the taking that one particular thing and moving it into the right direction. The transforming a company from what it was before, growing it into something else that we didn't know you could move towards. So we found that people want respect for themselves and they want to be important to other people. That is a natural feeling for an entrepreneur. It isn't necessarily about the success. It's about being respected by other people for what you do, being important in that way. A true entrepreneur is not driven by outward appearances of success, you know, those trappings of success, but rather solving a problem, finding a solution to something that provides value to your customers, to its customers. And then his final point here is that many serial entrepreneurs learn the value of self-actualization after the first exit. And that exiting is where you finish up one entrepreneurial activity and move to the next one, and the next one, and the next one. If you talk to a very tried and true entrepreneur, they will tell you there's always another opportunity. They're always looking for that next opportunity. There's an exit plan from this one. Once that exit happens, they're moving on to the next entrepreneurial activity. Make sure that you understand that sometimes that self-actualization is what's really, really important for you. You have to be your motivator. You have to be the one that tells yourself that you're successful as you move on. And then he talks about entrepreneurship being in your blood. The interesting thing here is that traditionally, if you've had someone in your family that was an entrepreneur, then you will find a connection with that person if you are an entrepreneur also. And there's a couple things that are interesting is that in Los Angeles, in the LA area, we have a higher percentage of entrepreneurs here than traditionally in other areas of the United States. And he talks about different cities, New York being one of them, okay? LA being one of them. We're top entrepreneurs. People go as entrepreneurs to make it, I guess would be the best way to put it. He says you need to have a network of friends and associates who are entrepreneurs also. That you have to be able to reach out to other entrepreneurs, talk to them, express to them where you're at, what's going on, what's happening in your life, and that you need to also understand that being an entrepreneur or entrepreneurship can be a very lonely endeavor, because there's a lot of time when you're working on trying to get something to work and you're the only one. You're the only one vested in it. You're the only one pushing it. You're the only one that is accountable for it, and that no one else in your family may understand that. So you may have to find a surrogate family, other people, other entrepreneurs that you can kind of work with. And he talks about entrepreneurial courage. And he says sometimes it skips a generation. So you may look back and say, wow, you know, my mother and father or my brother and sister were not really entrepreneurs. I don't really have anybody in the family. He says, look beyond that. My great-grandfather, my great-uncle. There are other places. My great-aunts started a recipe for something. There are entrepreneurs in your family. You just need to look and find where they are. And he talks about the demographics of being an entrepreneur. And in these demographics, he says it's never too late to be an entrepreneur. It's not just a young person's game. He talks about older Americans. So here, Americans between the ages of 55 and 64 constitute the second largest jump in entrepreneurs. Okay? Americans between the ages of 35 and 44 represent the largest increase in entrepreneurial activity from 2008 to 2009. Now that's data that is agreed almost 10 years old, but that trend has continued on. And he talks about don't letting your age deter you from pursuing your dreams. That if you have a dream, it doesn't matter how old you are. If you're young, if you're middle-aged, if you're older-aged, if you have hair the same color as mine, you know, it is never too late to become an entrepreneur. Now, finally, we're gonna, in closing, kind of sum up a couple areas. So when he talks about trying to create the entrepreneurial mind, how does one develop the entrepreneurial mind? Well, there's a couple different ways. One is listening to stories. These are stories. Find other books. Find other, I'll call it, things that you can look at that describe what that entrepreneurial experience was like. Mistakes during the early days of a business can be devastating if you're starting up one. So the things you need to remember are looking at spending too much money too fast. Hold a small pot aside. Choosing a bad business partner is another way to have a bad occurrence. Choosing risky risks. So there are risks around us all the time. Entrepreneurs are always looking for risk, opportunity, and profit. Those are the three key areas, and many times they will explore a risk that other people won't. But if a risk is too risky, they should be able to recognize it and stay away from it. Don't waste time. Wasting time is wasting effort. There's one resource you can never regain. Entrepreneurs will tell you they can lose all their money and they can come back and make money. What they can't do is they can't replenish time. Once time goes away, it's gone. So don't waste time. They say that you always need a sense of urgency. Entrepreneurs are always, you know, they've got a sense of urgency. I've got to do this. They're driven. That's the type of behavior that you want to exhibit, and you want to make sure you don't operate haphazardly without a process. all entrepreneurs will talk about how there is a process. Even though it doesn't appear to be a process for an entrepreneur, there is always a process that they're exploring. So those are my closing thoughts for you for this particular lecture. I hope you enjoyed it. Once again, my name is Dale Deerdorf. Have a great week. Goodbye.